Recruiters are not only paying attention to how closely you align technically, but I'm a recruiter at Insight Global. Insight Global, we're the second largest staffing and professional services company in North America.
How important is storytelling in interviews, and how can job seekers develop their storytelling skills?
Recruiters are not only paying attention to how closely you align technically, but also those communication skills and how you can reflect on your previous experience. People just reaching out saying, "Hi, Michela, how's your Monday going? How's your Friday going?" And that's it afterwards. I think that people tend to forget that networking is like a long-term game. You might not find the sort of connection that is going to get you a job tomorrow. Maybe they can assist you somehow down the line and put in like a good note for you. Your ability to admit where there's lack of knowledge in certain areas. I've had candidates go into interviews up against other candidates and they receive the job offer simply because they're wanting to show that willingness to learn. That goes such a long way as opposed to someone who's a bit of a know-it-all.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. And today we have Michela here with us. And thank you so much, Michela, for joining. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. This is super exciting.
No, but thank you for joining. And so can you share a little bit about your background and your role at Insights Global and what you do right now?
For sure. So I'm a recruiter at Insight Global. But just before that, I had a little stint in talent acquisition. So I was an intern there, and then I got brought on permanent position as a talent acquisition specialist. And there I did executive search for tech startups. But now with Insight, I'm a recruiter, so I'm working on all kinds of roles throughout many different industries. Our office, though, specifically, we do specialize with tech. But we do kind of go beyond that as well. So I find most of my days is talking to like software engineers, all of that sort of candidates. And yeah, I'm actually currently moving into an account management position here as well. So hopefully soon to be promoted. But yeah,
Hmm.
recruiter for now.
And can you tell us more about what Insight Globals does?
Yeah, for sure. So, Insight Global, we're the second largest staffing and professional services company in North America. Like I said, our office does specialize in IT, but we work within many different industries and a whole bunch of other companies. So, what we basically do is find candidates for contract to hire, as well as permanent roles.
Uh, you mentioned that you started in recruitment a few years ago as an intern, and then now you're working full time as well. So, what inspired to pursue a career in recruitment?
For sure. I think first of all, I love people. Just being able to connect with people and understand, their journeys to where they've gotten to where they are, and then help them in that next step for their next opportunity is really rewarding in itself. But then on top of it, also getting to understand how business works in general, how different lines of business operate, what kinds of skill sets they're taking in those areas, what kind of jobs people do is just really interesting. There's so much out there that you don't even know exists.
Hmm. And you mentioned that Insights Global is a staffing agency, right? So there are a lot of job seekers out there who don't know who don't know that these staffing agencies exist. So how can job seekers effectively utilize staffing agencies like Insights Global to find job opportunities?
Absolutely, yeah. People can utilize staffing agencies just the same way that they would with like an internal HR department. So, reaching out to recruiters, we utilize an internal database, which we have literally millions of candidate profiles that we search through when we have a new job opening that becomes available. But since these databases have literally, like I said, millions of candidates on it, I think the most effective way to communicate with these recruiters is to explore their website first. So pick some specific openings that match your background, pique your interest. Send them on over to the recruiter. And I always say sending through like a little jot notes list of how you think that you'd make a good fit for it always goes a long way as well.
There are a lot of misconceptions about working with staffing agencies when it comes to job seekers, such as, oh, if I go to these staffing agencies, there are millions of other candidates as well. So
Right.
what are some misconceptions about working with staff agencies that you have encountered while working at Insights Global?
Yeah, for sure. This is a great question. So I think staffing agencies have a bad rap for being like sweatshop style resume factories. It's true, we work with way tighter deadlines than like an in-house HR department that does their own recruitment. But I think that sometimes people wrongfully assume that, we don't care for our candidates, or that we're not going to touch base with them once we get them hired. Good recruiters, whether they're working for an in-house HR department or a staffing agency like me, they're really going the extra mile to touch base with their candidates and building their own network. That's how they're going to be most successful within their own role.
You mentioned that if you see a job posting that's out there, you can tailor your resume to it, or you can have a conversation with a recruiter about that particular job posting as well, right? So
Mm,
and there are tons and tons of people who apply to thousands of jobs that are out there. And so how important is targeted job search strategy in your opinion?
yeah. I think it's super important. You're not only going to save your own time by having to, constantly edit your own resume to tailor it to the job that you're applying for, but you're also going to kind of develop that skill to speak better to your experience, to speak better to how you're going to make a good fit for those specific roles. And then ultimately, I think that that just leads into performing better during interviews.
I know so many people who apply to thousands of jobs that are out there, and they don't take in the time to customize their resumes, or they don't take in the time to customize their cover letters, and they just apply to the same job posting with the same resume, and then they expect a different result. And I tell them, if you want something different in terms of the results, change your strategy, right? And then they start thinking about, okay, I need to start networking with people. And they start thinking that networking is all about finding jobs and finding a referral. So they start reaching out to recruiters, sending them their resumes. And since you're a recruiter, I'm pretty sure that you must get tons and tons of messages on LinkedIn. And so, what are some common messages you have received from job seekers that instantly make you not want to reply back to them?
I think that those super generic ones that maybe you could say come across a little bit desperate, job seeker kind of vibe, where it's, hey, I'm a DevOps engineer, let's say, for example, what openings do you have? That's not really how my role works. I'm working essentially for the client, and I'm going out into the market and finding perfect profiles with what they have given me. I'm not necessarily just receiving messages and then adding people into our database. So it's kind of like working backwards. If I were to go and do that, it would just take too long. We have hundreds of openings. I'm not quite sure which one your skill set aligns with. It's going to take me a pretty decent chunk of my day to understand even what your background is, and then to go into our hundreds of openings and find one that's going to be applicable. The best thing that you can do is take a look at the staffing agency's website, find a job posting that really aligns with your background, send on through your resume along with a very brief jot notes list of how you think that you're going to make a good fit for that role. Once you send that on through, I actually have some incentive to go and take a look at that role, double check, make sure your resume aligns with that jot notes list that you sent me, and then I can get going and working on it for you.
Mhm. And so to reiterate on that, job seekers, if they're reaching out to a recruiter from a staffing agency for example, needs to be super specific about the job posting that they want to get, or they want to apply for, and add in as much information as possible about why they think they are a good fit for this position, so that it's much more easier for you to just look at that one particular job posting instead of going through all these millions of other job postings as well, right? So yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think if people who are reaching out to recruiters like you at a staffing agency need to keep that in mind as well, which is be as specific as possible about what you're looking for instead
Mhm.
of being generic, because you get tons of messages, you have tons of job postings, and I'm pretty sure that you don't have the time to have those back and forth conversations with these people, texting them, oh, what are you looking for? And then
Right.
they tell you that, oh, I'm looking for this, and then you ask them, oh, what skill sets do you have? And then there's that back and forth conversation, right? So how can you reduce that time to get to a decision, right? I think that's really important.
Absolutely. I'll throw in one more thing too. A message that I get kind of frequently that I think is actually super effective is people just reaching out saying, "Hi, Michaela, how's your Monday going? How's your Friday going?" And that's it afterwards. I think that people tend to forget that networking is like a long term game. I'm more likely to actually remember your face and your profile if you're to just have a general conversation with me. And then when the time rolls around and I'm looking for that DevOps engineer, I remember, hey, this person reached out to me and said hello like a month ago. Let me take a peek back at their profile.
And now digging deep into networking, as you mentioned, so what do you think, or what role does networking play in a successful job search?
Yeah, I networking is literally how I've gotten every single job I've ever worked to date. And I think that people tend to forget that networking with your current place of employment is also super important. When I'm doing like an open market search for a candidate that I need, let's say like a business analyst, I'm calling the candidate, describing that job to them, and they're not maybe in the market, they're not really interested, but hey, I have a friend who's actually in the market, works a similar role, and I think would make a really good fit here. That's perfect for me. I'm going to go and give that candidate a call.
What are some strategies you would recommend to job seekers when they message recruiters, or let's say not even recruiters in staffing agencies, maybe it's recruiters in organizations or even hiring managers? I know you mentioned a few, but are there any other strategies that you would recommend to job seekers when they message recruiters or hiring managers?
I think just being really specific about what you're looking for and where your skill sets are going to align. And then also having that ability to really speak to your experience, to know how to summarize it very clearly and concisely. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone send on through like a chat GTP generated summary of their career, and it's just too much fluff. It's just too much words. My day is as crammed as it can possibly get. It's like a breath of fresh air when someone just sends me jaw notes.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think I receive a lot of messages on LinkedIn as well from these job seekers, and I can see that they have copy pasted the whole message from ChatGPT, and
Yeah.
it feels robotic instead of a human touch to it, right? And I think, and so I'll tell you the story as well. So la I think it was 2 days ago, someone messaged me on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
She sent me a message that I think she copy pasted to everyone, and the a message started with "Dear Ma'am," and it went on to saying that, oh, I would love for an IT position at your company, and I'm not even hiring for anyone right now. And she copy pasted that message across all of these different people that she was trying to connect with, and you can see that she copy pasted it first of all, and then it's chat gpt generated as well, and there was so much information in it that if you look at it, you instantly don't want to reply back to that person,
Right.
right? So I think if people are very strategic about how they reach out to recruiters or hiring managers or anyone in general about making sure that they have that first good impression, I think that's really important, and that's what's missing right now.
For sure. And something else I'd love to add on too is that I think the intention behind sending a chat GTP generated message is to make sure that you have good looking communication. But it has the reverse effect. When I see a message that I know is generated by AI, I'm now concerned about your actual communication skills. So it's just best to avoid it altogether.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you bring up a really good point that if you copy paste something from ChatGPT, for example, or from any AI generated sources, it shows that you lack that communication skills. And even if, let's say, even if you fool someone with that, if you have a conversation in person, you can
Right.
instantly catch, right? So
Yeah,
I think people need to be really careful about how they use ChatGPT to message people, and try to add their personal touch to it as well.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a good point.
And now talking more about resumes. So
Mhm.
as a recruiter, you must have seen tons and tons of resumes as well. And what are some key elements of a strong resume that stand out to recruiters?
First and foremost is a clean resume. I think sometimes people get a little bit too graphic design happy, but that actually makes my job a lot harder. I have to go in sometimes and edit your resume if there's like a spelling error, or if we kind of want to switch things around when we're presenting your resume to a client. If you've got a simple white background with a black text, it's a very basic format. This really makes things easier and quicker. That means I'm getting your profile in front of a hiring manager faster than other people. And then I think that people sometimes will include um, minimizing experience onto their resume. So experience like from way back in their previous work years that's just not relevant to the role that they're applying for today. This is actually really distracting and kind of takes away from what your focus is nowadays or the sort of role that you're trying to target today.
And now let's say if someone had that five to, let's say if they had a 10-year experience in a particular industry, or they have tons of different experiences in within 10 years, what advice would you give to someone who's in that situation where, okay, they have that 10 or 5 years of experience? How much experience do they show on a resume? Is it there 2 years, 3 years? What advice would you give to someone who's in that boat?
That's a good question. I think that people who have tons and tons of experience, including that on your resume for a role that's looking for someone with 20 plus years of experience or whatever it is, makes sense. That shows that you fulfill that requirement that's coming from our client. Sometimes we have people who are quite senior and then aren't moving on to interview rounds simply because they are too senior for the role. They want someone a little bit more junior or at like that intermediate level. So in those cases, it might be best to kind of limit it or only showcase either your most recent experience in that industry or role, or also your most impressive, maybe you could say, experience within that industry or role.
And one of the common things I hear from job seekers is that it takes a lot of time to customize their resumes to specific job postings and job applications while they're in that job search journey, right? So, in your opinion, how important is it for job seekers to tailor their resume for specific job applications?
Yeah, I totally get this perspective. It's definitely important to just tweak your resume so that way you're kind of hitting some of the key notes that are within like a job description. But this might seem a little bit grim. You're either going to be a fit for the role or you're not. Sometimes it's really just black and white. So if you're really heavily editing your resume for the job that you're applying for, I think it's more effective to just consider what type of role you're going to have most success in and then targeting applying for those specific roles.
And I think that goes back to our point of not applying to thousands of jobs, and making sure that you focus on quality instead of quantity as well, right?
Absolutely. No,
and
absolutely.
and and I think one topic that I skipped over was, how do these staffing agencies work, right? In terms of, let's say if a job seeker reaches out to you on LinkedIn, or they go to your website, for example, right, and they find a job posting, and they tell you that, okay, this is the job posting that I'm interested in, or this is the field that I'm interested in, can you help me out? So once they do that, what does that workflow look like from your standpoint, and what do you do in the back end to
Mhm.
get them to land that job that they are looking for, right? Like, can you share more about that workflow that you go through as a recruiter in the back end?
Absolutely. So my day is structured a little bit different, and I think that is quite similar across different staffing agencies. I'm actually given a job requisition that I have to work on. So I'm getting explained to what exactly we're looking for, how many years of experience, what a culture fit looks like, all these other qualities and skills that they're going to need for this specific opening. And then I'm actively going into the market, getting an idea of what other companies hire for this like similar skill set, getting an idea of what the compensation ranges look like for those roles, and then I'm actively poaching these candidates from our clients' competitors or just from the open market. So I'm the one who's actually making the first move on the profiles that I think are going to be a good fit. So when I get messages reaching on out to me, it's almost like backwards. This is just like a supplementary way of me getting candidates in for positions that we have open. It's not going to be my first way of going about it. It's just something that I'm going to do on the side. So that's why it's really important that the messages I receive are really clear, concise, and are going to be a really effective use of time for me.
And yet I think now looking at your workflow, that you personally get one job requisition and you specifically work on that, and then you look at your database of clients, or look at who's out there as well, and then making sure that you find the right candidates. And so let's say once you find those right candidates, now the next step, I believe, is getting them an interview with the client, right? And so what are some essential steps job seekers should take to prepare for interviews?
So basically, what I do is conduct the first round screening calls. Now, our promise to all of our clients is that we are going to screen all of our candidates twice before we actually set them up for an interview directly with the client. So I can basically speak to how they can prepare for the screening calls with me. I think that good standard way of kind of just getting into it is to ask for the job description, really review it, and take note of maybe some parts of it that you don't understand, some questions that you might have about it. Prepare some questions for me about what the company does, what the company looks like, what the role is going to look like. That just shows genuine interest in pursuing this opportunity. Researching the company on your own time is crucial. Getting as much information as you can about the projects and initiatives that they have going on at that time can definitely help you as well, can help you to tailor your answers to what basically they're looking for.
You said that you conduct two screening calls with the candidates, right? Oh, what kind of questions do you ask in those screening calls? And what are you trying to look for in those screening calls? Is it the cultural fit that they have with the client, for example, or is it like do they even have the right skill sets, or they can they speak to their experiences that they have shown in their resume? So what do you look for in those screening calls that can lead them to that interview with the client itself?
Absolutely. I would say my first initial reach out, that first screening call, is to assess if you have the correct skills, certifications, background, hard technical skills that we're going to need for this role. Like I said, I work in tech, so sometimes those things are really difficult to understand. We need to make sure that we're on the right track and finding the right profiles on paper. That's basically just to verify that your experience aligns with what the client's looking for. Now, the second call, I always prepare my candidates for that second call by saying, it's my manager who would conduct those. They're not only looking at your how closely you're going to match that job description, but they're also looking at your communication skills. Now, that's going to entail two separate categories. First of which is how clear and concise you can speak about your experience. And then the second part of that is how well you can reflect on your previous experience. That whole second call is basically to figure out, are we comfortable putting you in front of a client with our stamp of approval on it?
Thank you for sharing that. And so, to summarize, the first call is kind of to identify if they have the necessary skill sets, if they have those right technical skills. And then the second call is in terms of seeing if they're able to communicate clearly and concisely, and if they're able to reflect back on their experiences in a way which is again clear and concise, because a lot of job seekers, they can ramble on for hours and hours about their experiences. And I think that's a common mistake that a lot of job seekers make. And if you're able to get over that hurdle or that obstacle of just rambling on for hours about your experiences, and learning how to be concise, I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's huge. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I forgot to. It's super important, and I'm guilty of it myself as well. When you have tons of ideas about how you think you make a good fit, you're excited about the role. It's super easy to just talk yourself into a hole, and that's not very good. It just doesn't work out,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
And how can candidates make a first impression during an interview?
I think people tend to forget that the more your interview feels like a regular conversation, the better that you're actually doing. So it's really good to just also like reciprocate any sort of questions that are happening throughout the whole interview. So, for example, if an interviewer asks you about your experience working in like a fast-paced environment, I would say my answer and then finish my answer with another question for them. So, like, would you say that the environment at the company is quite fast paced? Or maybe something like, is the project or initiatives you have going on right now, are they moving quite quickly? I think that that just like shows a genuine interest in really understanding what exactly is happening at the company and how you can be of value to that.
Hmm. I think a lot of these job seekers, they need to learn how to have a conversation with the employer, and the same goes with the employers as well, right? It's interviews are supposed to be, in my opinion, they're supposed to be a conversation instead of the employer just going through all the questions and then uh, the candidate just answering all those questions, right? And it has to be a two-way conversation where it feels as if the candidate is getting something out of the conversation as well, and then obviously the employer is getting out of the conversation as well. And there's a mismatch right now that happens between job seekers and employers, that the candidates, they get so nervous before the interviews that they think that, oh, I'm just going to answer the questions that these employers are asking me and that's it, and they
Yeah,
don't even take the time to ask them questions, and
right.
and they feel as if it's just one way, but no, it's supposed to be a conversation, and that's what a lot of job seekers make the mistake of thinking.
hmm Exactly. But I did have one other point too to mention. I actually have a story about a candidate that I had submitted for a junior level tech role. And she didn't quite have all of the experience that we were needing. I think we were looking for like 3 years, still kind of a junior role. She was fresh out of school. I think she had like 1 year under her belt, but she showed really good initiative and willingness to learn. After she had actually interviewed, she had sent me a really nice written email about, hey, Michaela, I'm curious if you can just forward the message onto the hiring team that I loved like the time just even discussing about this subject matter. It's something that I love and this is great practice for me. Whether or not, I receive an offer, I'm just really appreciative of their time. And I forwarded that on over to the hiring team and that made a great first impression. Little things like that, just to kind of go the extra mile, show that you care, I think really, really matter.
For sure, I love that story because it shows that human touch and human element to it, right?
Yeah,
It shows that you care about that particular job, even
right.
though, let's say, if you get rejected, it's fine. You still have, you still care about that job posting or the job application, and then you show that, oh, it's fine, you rejected me, but let's keep in touch, right? And I think that's important as well.
Had candidates like maybe get rejected after a first round interview that still try to keep in touch with me and show some real level of character in managing that rejection, that I will circle back to in a couple months time with a very similar role who we will send off for another interview.
And one of the things that you had mentioned that you guys do in those screening calls is that you look for people who are able to articulate their experiences in a proper way. And that ties into storytelling, right? So,
Right.
how important is storytelling in interviews, and how can job seekers develop their storytelling skills?
Yeah, this is like my number one tip overall is storytelling. I think it's so important. I think that, just like I mentioned, recruiters are not only paying attention to how closely, you align technically, but also those communication skills and how you can reflect on your previous experience. That really shows, what you've learned in your previous roles, what the challenges were, how did you overcome them? Questions like, what was your favorite part of your most recent job and why? How do you want to grow in your next role? These are all really great questions that you can reflect while telling the story of your career. And it just gives me the full picture, basically, of where you were, where you want to go, where you're at now, and how I can best help you.
That's what I'm trying to teach people as well with InterviewPal, which is an AI powered mock interview practice platform that helps job seekers improve their interviewing skills and helps them in articulating their skill sets properly, and show them how do you go from, from rambling on your responses to having a proper structure and being concise with your response. And I think if you're able to tell stories about your experiences in a very clear and a concise manner without rambling on, that's like the perfect fit for any employers, right? Because those communication skills, they come in handy while you're at the job as well.
Exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. Something else too I can throw in there that I think really ties into communication is your ability to admit where there's lack of knowledge in certain areas. I've had candidates go into interviews up against other candidates and they receive the job offer simply because they're wanting to show that willingness to learn. They're genuine about where they might not have 5 years of experience, but they got three and they really care about it. That goes such a long way as opposed to someone who's a bit of a know-it-all. No one wants that sort of culture on their team.
For sure. I think, I'll share a story as well. So I had connected uh, this one employer with five people that I knew, and they were all looking for a job in the digital marketing space. And so the employer, he sent out this survey to all of these job seekers, and they were all recent graduates as well. And he sent out the survey to about how comfortable they feel working with these different digital marketing tools and their skill sets. And the employer asked them to rate it on a scale of 1 to 5, and I connected him with five people, and four of them they rated uh everything from like 1 to 5 to 5, 5, 5, 5. I know everything. And
Mm-hmm.
then the fifth candidate, what she did was she was really honest in terms of her experience with utilizing all these different digital marketing tools. And guess what? Guess who got hired? The person who was really honest about their experiences, she got hired because the employer, he really liked that she was honest about her experiences, because you're a recent grad and you don't have a lot of experience with all these different tools. So how can you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 as a 5 that I'm an expert in everything, right? So if you're honest about where you're at, and if you show that you're willing to learn and grow, I think that's what matters, and employers love that.
Huge. Yeah, that's exactly it. I literally, it was one of my very first starts here actually at Insight Global. Starts, which are hires, is the terminology that we use here. But it was my candidate who I had sold him into my manager saying, hey, listen, this guy doesn't have the 4 years of experience. He's got two, but he really obviously cares about this space. It was in cybersecurity, I believe. He's done passion projects. I think he's a great communicator. I really like him. Give him a shot. Got him on the phone. He did great. Yeah, ended up actually getting the job up against other candidates who had way more years of experience and who on paper looked like a better fit. It's really just all about how you kind of come into it and how you look at things, I think. So
Hmm. For sure. Yeah, I think, yeah, if all job seekers out there can take something out of this conversation, I think it's having those storytelling skills is really important, and developing those storytelling skills is really important, and being honest with your skill sets, and making sure that you're showing that you're willing to learn and grow. And so one one more question that I get from job seekers, or I have seen among job seekers, is that a lot of job seekers, they get rejected from all these different jobs, and they constantly start doubting themselves that, oh, am I even fit for this position? Am I going to get this job or not, right? So how should job seekers handle rejections and stay motivated during their job search? Do you have any advice for that?
yeah, I think that me just saying this alone will help with that. I can't even tell you how many times I have seen perfect candidates for the role. They're a perfect fit on paper. They go and nail their interviews, and then they don't end up getting the job for whatever reason. There's a billion factors at play, many of at which are not at all of the candidate's fault. There's a little bit of luck definitely involved in the process. So I think that that's something really important for people to remember, especially when they are getting rejection. Something else that people can do is circle back with their recruiter or with the hiring team that had interviewed them and asking for feedback. Obviously, those are not easy conversations. I've had to give that feedback myself to candidates, and sometimes it's not received well, but really just kind of depends how you take that information and work with it to improve for next time. I've definitely been there myself. At the end of like the day, no one is perfect. So just keeping that in mind, I think, is really important.
For sure. I love that. And so, one final question for you. What is one, or you can say more as well, what is one final piece of advice you would like to give to job seekers that are navigating today's job market?
I think that showing initiative is really important in terms of like networking. You might not find a sort of connection that is going to get you a job tomorrow. Maybe they can assist you somehow down the line and put in like a good note for you. But really, your purpose of networking should be to just show that you're taking initiative within the industries and spaces that you're most interested in. And I think that down the line, that really does well. I think that that's been a personal thing I've utilized within my career so far. It's just making those connections and doing kind of all that you can to put yourself out there is really important.
Mhm. No, thank you for sharing that. I love that piece of advice. I think just to summarize the whole conversation, I know we covered a lot of different things. I think a few things that stood out to me personally were uh, storytelling skills are really important, and if you're able to tell your story in a very clear and concise manner, that's what matters. Networking is really important, and if you're reaching out to a recruiter like you, for example, who is working at a staffing agency, making sure that you're being specific in your message and asking for and showing that you have the skill sets for that job posting is really important. And the third thing that stood out to me is what you just said right now is putting yourself out there and not giving up during your job search journey. I think that's key as well while you're while you're looking for a job. So thank you so much for sharing all these insights. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and thank you so much for your great questions. I think that this is going to be super helpful for people who are in the job market.